think I was driving to Evelyn's for Bible study. And I told her if me and her were to ever break up, it would really suck. Because every time I'm driving down the 87, there's that exit that says Alma. So like, there would always be a reminder of what I used to have. And it would remind me never to propose to her, but to talk about what I could have been. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. So what ends up happening though is, so back on the 87. Everything takes place on the 87 for me, apparently. So Alma and I are driving down the 87, and she looks to the horizon, and you see all these buildings they're bringing up, right? And on top of these buildings, you see cranes. And every time that Alma sees a crane, she brings up this story. She says, when Deshaun was little, every time he would see a crane, he would say, look, a plane. So now every time I see a crane, I go, look, a plane. Even if I'm by myself, that story sticks in my mind. You know? When it comes to things about God, it's no different. You know, we truly are in a relationship with God. And in order to develop that relationship, we must spend time with Him. We spend time with Him in His Word. We spend time with Him in song. We spend time with Him in moments when He answers our prayers. And the more experiences that we share with God, the more likely you are to see Him in different places. One of the first things I learned as a Seventh-day Adventist growing up as a kid is that as an Adventist, you're not supposed to eat pork. Right? And so, you're not supposed to eat pork. And it's funny because I got siblings now who are no longer in this church. But still, if pork is presented to them, they think about it, right? It's something that's really ingrained in Adventists. And so every time I'm walking by and I see somebody eating chicharrones or eating bacon or something, I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness. And then you realize, wait a minute, what is it about eating pork that's so bad? And then that triggers a memory of the book of Daniel. And I remember the story of how Daniel and his friends were put in front of what was it? Like they were all captured, right? With a bunch of other young people. And they were forced to eat the king's food. And Daniel and his friends refused to, right? And they ate vegetables and waters. And they were able to show that by following God's footsteps, they were having better lives, right? And then we see, and I wonder, what was it in Daniel that made him at that moment decide he was going to follow God? And I don't know if this is the case, but if we go to the book of Proverbs, chapter 4, verse 20 through 22, it says, my son, pay attention to what I say. Turn your ear to my words. Do not let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart, for they are life to those who find them and health to one's whole body. And I wondered to myself, what circumstances do we encounter day to day where we are tested and we are found with an opportunity to testify about God? 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, therefore, whatever you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. Amen. Let's bow our heads for a word. Heavenly Father, we humbly come upon you, and we ask that the Holy Spirit come upon us. We ask that we are able to see you in all things, that we are able to testify through our actions with what we eat, what we drink, what we do. We ask that we are able to take this message and apply it to our lives. We ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. Not too long ago, actually it feels like it was not too long ago, but about 16 months ago, I started going to this nursing program. And I just completed it. 16 months went by. Just because I completed the nursing program does not mean I'm a nurse. I don't have a license. And even when I get a license, it's not going to make me a good nurse. So if you come and ask me something, I'm going to do the same thing you do. And I'm just going to go to Google and try to find what it says. Because I don't have the experience at having encountered things, so I'm not that good of a nurse yet. So I'm just giving you a heads up. But because I wasn't knowledgeable, and because they knew that going into the program, one of the things that they would do is when we would go out after learning stuff, we actually started going to nursing homes. And we would go to these nursing homes and we would do clinicals. And one of the tasks that we were asked to do was we would get partnered up with a real nurse. And we would go to the nurse, and the nurse would tell us, hey, go to this group of patients, and we want you to check their glucose levels, check their sugar. So we would go to these particular patients, and throughout our program, most of the patients that we dealt with were patients that had diabetes. So we would go, and we would check their blood sugar. And it was astonishing because a lot of the people who had diabetes, when you would look at the table on the side of the bed, you'd be surprised to see how many of them had sodas. Not diet soda, but regular soda. How many of them had cookies and candies and all kinds of other stuff that you know and they know are not good for them, right? But out of all the cases that I encountered, there was one particular case that really came to mind. And this case was, one day we go to this facility and I go to this nurse. I think it was the first time I had gone to that facility. And he said, hey, when you go to this patient in room such and such, her name is so-and-so, you're going to go to her, and I just want to give you a heads up. She used to be a nurse. Because, look, I suffer with sweaty hands when I get nervous, and trying to put on those gloves when your hand is sweaty, it's really, really tough. So I'm nervous to begin with because I'm going to go see this patient. Now add to the fact that she's a nurse, man, my hands were drenched. So I walk up to her, I'm already kind of frazzled, and I know she's a nurse, and I'm trying to put on the gloves, and the gloves rip. Oh my goodness. And so I keep on going, and I do the thing, and I walk out. And I look at her reading, and it was like 300 something. And so I go, and I'm kind of concerned, because we were told, hey, if it's that high, you go and you tell the nurse right away. And I tell the nurse, hey, blood sugar is over 300. And he says, oh, that's fine. That's normal. I was like, what? So then the next time I go in there, now I'm not so, nervous, I'm a little bit more calm. And I actually start paying attention to the surroundings, and I notice that she's got so many bags of candy. And she's got so many goodies, and you see wrappers laying around, so you know she's been eating. And the thing is, not only is she diabetic, she's also on dialysis, and she also suffers from pressure ulcers that are not healing due to her diabetes. And I asked myself, how is it that someone who was a nurse, who treated people like this, gets to this point? It was hard for me to understand at that moment. When we go and we open up our Bibles, there's a text that I'm going to share with you. You can go to Hebrews chapter 10, verse 26. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 26. And it says, if we deliberately keep on sinning after we have received the knowledge of the truth, no sacrifice for sin is left. Now I want to give you a little context. It'd be great if that's how it ended and that's it and I can prove a point. But that's not entirely how this verse goes. If you keep on reading down the verse, what it's actually talking about is Jesus and denying Jesus. And if you deny Jesus and you know about Jesus, then that's it. There's pretty much no hope for you. Because he is what covers your sin. And if you're not willing to understand it, then there's really nothing you can do about it. There's nothing that can be done for you. But that same principle really does apply to sin. When we go in knowing that something is wrong and we continuously do it, it becomes a habit, it becomes a pattern. It's something that's really hard to let go. When I was a kid, when I was maybe in my early teens, I started hanging out with friends and I wasn't always at home. I started using a lot of profanity. When you're a little kid and you see a little kid use profanity, you can tell that they know that they're doing it because they'll say it and they'll kind of look around and make sure nobody saw it, right? They know it's wrong. But as you start getting older and your friends are using it and you're using it, you become accustomed to it. So much so that I remember one time I was out visiting some friends from church and I was with their family. And one of the friends, granted, he's about my age, I've heard him cuss plenty of times. And he goes, hey Moses, bro, you cuss a little bit too much. Yeah, I didn't even realize I was using so much profanity. I used it so often that I completely lost track of it. When we continuously do something that we know we're not supposed to do, eventually it gets to the point where you just do it automatically, not even thinking about the consequences. I wonder how that lady got it. I wonder if at some point that lady decided, you know what? I want to have a cookie. And then the next day, oh, I want to have another. I want to have a soda. Why not? It's just one soda. And then eventually, so on and so forth, to the point where your body started breaking down. And then it gets to a point where your body's so broken down that you're like, what's the point? I'm already sick. What do I have to look forward to? Might as well just enjoy the rest of my life, even though you're not feeling any better. On the flip side to that, when I was at work, I happened to help this lady. This lady asked for help. I went to her. She was an older lady. And so I thought it was going to be something trivial. A lot of older people come, they're like, oh, my card doesn't work. And they're using like a Safeway card at Costco. Whatever, just little things like that that seem obvious. But sometimes you get to a certain point and those things aren't that obvious. So I thought it was going to be one of those things. And no, there was absolutely nothing wrong with her card. She was doing absolutely everything right. She was very sharp, very aware. She even parked right. You'll see a lot of people when they go to the gas station, they park all kinds of ways. But she was driving a big SUV and she knew how to handle it. And so she was there. And so I'm talking to her. And I tell her, okay, so where are you coming from? She's like, oh, well, I just drove down from Auburn. I have a son who lives there and I went to go visit him for Easter, but I got a medical appointment that I'm going to be headed to right now. So that's why I'm back. She says, yeah, I drive to Auburn, I don't know, a couple times a year. She says, my son said he's going to start visiting me soon here, but for the meantime, I'll go visit him. I didn't think nothing too much of it. And so then she says, yeah, when I get to the doctor will say the same thing he says every year. Just keep on doing what you're doing. When she said that, I asked myself, okay, why would the doctor? I was like, man, you know, why am I asking, how old are you? She's like, I'm 84 years old. I'm like, 84 years old? I'm like, whoa, okay. I was like, okay, so what exactly is it that you do? She says, well, I'm a widow, so I do my own gardening. I mow my own lawn. I do all my errands, and I keep busy. She's like, mind you, I hurt afterwards. But I still do what I have to do. And that's all I do. I was like, wow, you know? And so then I shared this story with one of my other colleagues at work. His name is Don. And I was talking to him, and I told him about this lady. And how all she did was continuously work, and she was perfectly healthy. And then, so when I shared that with him, he told me, he's like, my uncle's in his 90s. He said, World War II veteran. And 4 times a week he goes out and he walks 2 miles around the neighborhood. He walks 2 miles, he just holds on to 2 walking sticks. He comes home and he says he hurts. But he goes, you know what? So what? I'm going to hurt anyway. And so then that leads me to another Bible verse. We can open up our Bibles to the book of Hebrews. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, verse 11. The book of Hebrews, chapter 12, verse 11. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Everything in life worth getting is hard work. And you keep on doing it and pursue it. And there's going to be times when you don't want to do it. It will feel that it's easier not to make that choice. But you continuously do it because you know in the end, it'll pay off. Romans chapter 5, verse 3 and 4 says, not only so, but we also glorify in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. So let me ask you, who wants to experience hope? Who wants to experience a change in character? And who wants to experience tribulation? Okay, a couple of you. But it takes tribulation to get to that point. Amen. You can't just hope to have that hope. You can't expect to have that change of character without that tribulation. We must go through that in order to get it. Matthew chapter 7, verse 24 and 25 says, therefore everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because that had its foundations on the rock. Towards the end of my nursing school, there was a lady that came by. Her name was Nurse Gwynn. And Nurse Gwynn came to give us a review to prepare us for our NCLEX, which is the test that you take in order to get your board certification of being a nurse. So she came by and she was giving us tips and stuff, and what was interesting about her was that she would throw little bits of Bible knowledge into it, and I was surprised. Like for instance, she brought up, she's like, isn't it remarkable that a baby in the biblical times would go and get circumcised after, I think was it the 8th day, 7th, 8th day? And she says, do you know when babies develop the clotting factor? It's like after 7 to 8 days. Whatever is the Bible said, the baby was going to go get circumcised, that's the point when the baby started being able to clot. So she was bringing little things like that into knowledge, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. And so when she shared that type of stuff, and some others, one day after she got out of, we all left class, I decided to stay back and ask her a few questions. And so I told her, like, Nurse Gwen, I really appreciate the fact that you bring biblical references into this thing. Like, very rarely do you hear biblical references in a place of education. So I really appreciate it. And so then she said, no, thank you. I feel a burning, and I know my Lord, and I've seen so many things, and I feel I have to share. I'm like, wow, thank you. And then I told her, I've thought about doing, I heard, because she had given her, I guess her background, and she said she used to be a hospice nurse. And so I told her, I thought about doing hospice nursing. I feel that it'd be easier to be able to share the word with somebody when they're going to pass. Maybe they'd be more receptive. And her answer kind of blew me away, because she said, you would think so. She's like, but that's not the case. She says most people, if they've lived their life, a godly life, and they pursue godly things, in the end, they're going to want and latch onto Christ. But those people who've lived their lives, their whole life, who are completely rejecting God, at the end, want nothing to do. Obviously, there's exceptions, but in general, that's what she found. So she said to those people, I would just mutter a prayer underneath my breath. All large things are constructed of smaller individual pieces, and then they come together to form something large. Every small decision that we make, every little choice that we make, builds upon another. And when you want to find out what is it that drove this one lady, what is it that drives somebody at the end, when you feel that all hope is gone, to completely reject Christ? What is it that drove that lady who, being a nurse for a big part of her life, decided she didn't care about her health, or at least appearance? What was it that led them? And there was a series of little choices that they made throughout their life that led them to that point. And the same thing applies to that other lady. That other lady who, and those people who in the end want to be close to God. Because in those moments, they hold on to that which they've practiced after little choice and little choice and little choice again. And they build onto it. Sometimes we come to church, and a lot of us are waiting to hear this amazing message. We want to hear this revelation, some new light, in order to have some change. So my question to you is, why not just do something with the little light that you have? If you're not able to build upon those little things that you now know, how do you expect, when it gets really difficult, that you'll be able to understand and apply those hard things? Our memory verse today was Psalms chapter 39, verses 4 and 5. If you get a chance, I encourage you to put this verse somewhere, highlight it, keep it in mind. Because the reason that I'm bringing all this up to you today, the reason why I felt so compelled to share this with you, is because throughout my nursing study, those 16 months, I realized, whoa, I felt like just yesterday I started that program. And now I'm done. Those 16 months went by like that. I go back and I realize, oh my gosh, I'm almost 40. I don't feel like I'm 40. You know, in my mind, I'm still in my mid-20s. Right? That's why when we have the young adult vespers, it's nothing but 40 and 50-year-olds who go. But no, but that's the thing, right? We don't realize that because time goes by so quick. And then when I would see these older people and I would talk to them at the nursing home, so we had, you know, again, I wasn't really allowed to do much, so I would just sit there and talk to them. And they would tell me, I can't believe I'm here. My life has gone by so quick. And this verse is there to remind us. Psalms 39, verse 4 and 5, it says, Lord, and this is the New Living Translation, Lord, remind me how brief my time on earth will be. Remind me that my days are numbered, how fleeting my life is. You have made my life no longer than the width of my hand. My entire lifetime is just a moment to you. At best, each of us is but a breath. Life goes by really quick. I see it in my mom. You know, I lived in Arizona for some years, and I moved back. And one of the reasons I moved back was because I would go about a year or so without seeing my mom. And when I would see her, I was shocked at how old she was becoming. Because I didn't see her every day, so when I would go back and I would see her, I would see the gray. I would see the wrinkles, you know. I would see her hunched over. I would see the pain. My mom, growing up, was the strongest woman I have ever met. She would have 3 jobs. She would sleep maybe 2 hours. You know, she did that for years, trying to help her children. You know, my mom never, ever buys new clothes for herself. I think once or twice for her kids' weddings, and that's it. You know, she'll take hand-me-downs, she'll do whatever, but she never does anything for herself. And my mom would work night and day. I don't know, I think until now, she actually sleeps maybe 6 hours. Whatever. Before that, 3, 4 tops, 2, we would have to wake her up. And I thought my mom was going to be able to do that forever. I never thought my mom would slow down. My mom, last year, finally retired. She decided to retire early. She's like, you know what, forget this. She's like, I don't want to wait till I'm 65. I want to retire as soon as I can. So she retired at 62. She's like, I know I'm not going to get a lot of money, but you know what? My life might not be much longer anyway. So I look at her, and throughout this nursing program, I stopped going to visit her. I used to visit her about every day, at least once a week, and I haven't seen her. And this is the last time that I saw her. I mean, don't get me wrong, she's not on death's door by no means, but I can see how frail she is. You know what I mean? I can see how life is really taking a toll. And in my eyes, I can close my eyes and my mom is still strong and healthy, and I look at her and she's not. And I look at the mirror and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm pretty much an old man. And I still look at you like mommy, you know? Like, it doesn't go away. In my eyes, I'm still like in my early 20s, and I'm still looking up to mom to help guide me. You know, when I was a kid, I used to look at people who were in their 40s, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're old. You know, and now I'm there. You know? I realized, oh my gosh, time really does go by so quick. And the reason I keep on reinforcing this message is because time is going to go by whether you like it or not. And you need to make those little choices now, today. You can't wait for something big to happen. By the time that happens, you might not have built up the strength for it. You do it today. You make little, small choices. Don't worry and be concerned about what you want to be. I mean, look at it from the standpoint of having some sense of guidance. But just know, when you see the people who are able to overcome, it's because they've been practicing a lifetime. So today, again, my plea to you is please start making those little choices now. So in the future, we can all be in heaven together, where time will no longer be an issue, where I no longer will have to be concerned about my mom getting old and sick, because me and her can spend eternity forever.
Amen.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we'd like to thank you for another glorious Sabbath day. Thank you for the sun. Thank you for the life that is springing around us. We thank you, Lord, for the many miraculous things that you do in our life. We thank you for your Son, Jesus, that gives us an opportunity to once again be with our loved ones and to be able to be with all those we care for all eternity in heaven, where time will no longer be an issue. Lord, give us the strength to make those little decisions today. And give us the strength to be able to see you in everything. To constantly be reminded of what it is that we're searching for and striving for. We ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.